I'm going to be a little bit controversial here at the start. I'm going to say we need to stop labeling teachers as leaders if we're not going to give them the ability to lead. This micro lesson is all about teacher, leader, agency. Now, agency is that ability or capacity to shape the circumstances within which we live. So for teacher leaders, agency is incredibly important because, let's be honest, they're at the closest level of leadership for us to our students and our community. They interact sometimes the most with our parents, other staff, and especially our students. So they have a finger much more closely on the pulse of our school than we do as senior leaders. So I'm addressing us as senior leaders, and I know many middle leaders are joining us today as well. But let's be mindful of the fact from the perspective of a senior leader that our middle leaders are the closest to the population that we want to influence the greatest amount of impact on. And those are our students. So we need to have them have a greater sense of agency in terms of the work that they do. Because I want to be honest with you, we can still expect to have disruptions to education next year. For those that are in China, we still have closed borders. There might still be problems with new teachers coming into the country. There is still the opportunity for the virus and to be influenced into our communities, disrupting school and for more remote learning. Vaccination is going slowly in Hong Kong. That's where I'm based. But for the most part, we hope to see it moving faster, but we're not going to get to that herd immunity until maybe the end of next year for adults. But I was reading a report recently that children, from newborns on up, we probably can't expect them to get anything until well into 2022. So they're a big part of our herd immunity. So just be prepared for the fact that there's going to still be continued to have travel restrictions. Our communities are going to still be impacted by the pandemic, even though we're slowly beginning to come out of it. As far as we open up our economies, we can still expect some disruptions. Now, even though there'll be a lot less remote learning, is that necessarily a good thing? Okay, well, that's a webinar for another time. But just consider that. We're going to have a lot of middle leaders that might want to continue to still use remote learning because there are some great tools that they've adopted over this last year and a half. Agency is all about allowing them to do that. Now, why prepare now to lead in the fall? That's really the question today. Why prepare now to lead in the fall? Well, Stephen Barkley, one of our leadership facilitators who does a personalized coaching, instructional coaching course, he and I were having a conversation about what schools we're expecting for next year. Now, he works with schools across the world. I work with schools mainly in Asia. And one theme was pretty predominant, and that was this idea of catching up. Now, for a lot of our schools here in Asia and private schools and international schools, this idea of catching up is really being pushed by parents. International educators are becoming much more savvy to social and emotional learning and well-being, not just of students, but of teachers. We're all concerned about additional pressure being put on the students, which actually there's a flow-on effect to the teachers and really affects their well-being, especially if they're not going to be able to travel this summer to go see their families. They're still going to be in China. So we have to take into account that the burden that we're all bearing as educators in Asia is going to continue to exist. So we need to be very mindful about the importance of the middle leader now in setting that expectation for that additional need, that maybe catching up is not the word we should be using. Now, he used a word called acceleration. So when Steve Barkley introduced this word acceleration to me, my heart started like palpitating, going, what, are you crazy? We don't want to increase or, accelerate learning, do we? But the way he explained it to me was, he shared with me a case of 8th grade students. There was a study done about 8th grade students that had basically failed math. And going into 9th grade, some of these students were placed in a remedial math program. Now, some other students, though, were placed into algebra. And what this study showed, and I know I'm probably not getting it exactly right, but what this study showed is that even though the students placed in 9th grade math still performed better than, say, their counterparts that did better in 8th grade, they actually performed much better in standardized testing than the students that were placed in the remedial math class. And so this idea of acceleration is not so much about getting caught up on what we've missed or where we failed, but it's about focusing on the learning that we need to do at this particular level now, just to get them comfortable at that level so they can move forward more comfortably and confidently. So this idea about acceleration is a theme for Acamus's workshops that I'm really excited to pursue, and really what this is about as well. Because if we give our teacher leaders the agency they need, we're going to find that they're going to be able to help accelerate not only the work that's within their teams, but also student learning. As I move through this, I just want to kind of give you all a quick introduction, because there's a few of you on here that I'm newly acquainted to through this opportunity. Firstly, I'm an Acamus contracted leadership facilitator. So my role is to design programs like this for Acamus members. I'm a Council of International Schools consultant, as well as Search Associates has hired me to help them with human resources management optimization, or advise schools within China to improve their human resource management practices. Here within this slide, and these slides I will share with anybody that's registered for the program. These are some of my social handles that you can get more information from me in real time, as well as track back and look at some of the stuff that I've done. So our 3 objectives for today in terms of how to prepare middle leaders for next year now is we need to clarify the purpose that we're expecting them to lead for next year. Next, I think it's incredibly important that if we want our teacher leaders to feel empowered and be able to give them an additional avenue or channel for support, we need to be considering about having a middle leadership team. This is something that I've been advocating for years, and I hope that those that are watching this video will buy into it once I've actually gone through what that middle leadership team looks like and how it works. Lastly, this idea of a sandbox is something that's incredibly important to me, because a lot of middle leaders will try to lead within their planning meetings. Those planning meetings crowd out the things that matter most because of all the administrative work that they have to do. So a sandbox actually protects that space for doing transformative work, the collaboration that we talk so much about. So how can we develop a sandbox so that our middle leaders can lead and not supervise? These are 2 terms I'm going to be talking about and addressing. But first, I just want to address one assumption I have. This micro lesson is all about the fact that we've already identified our middle leaders for next year. And if we have identified our middle leaders for next year, we've identified them based on these 3 dimensions. First is the team. You know, what type of team are they leading? How well formed is that team? Outcome, you know, what has this team actually achieved in the past? What are we expecting them to achieve in the future? You know, is there coherency in the tasks identified? Coherency is incredibly important because we throw a lot of work at our teams. Is that work coherent? Does it build on itself? Or is it just a bunch of separate work that needs to get done? If it's coherent and it's iterative and it builds on it and we can scaffold it, then our teams are going to feel much better about the work that they're doing, because they're going to see what it leads to. They're going to see the products of that work. Lastly, the capacity. What are the competencies that they have? The competencies of our middle leaders, not only to develop a team, but lead the tasks, but their capacity to understand and pursue the outcome that we expect. Now, these are questions that we need to address with our middle leaders prior to selecting them. But if you already have your middle leaders, backtrack, you know, go back, have these questions with them, and this should be your first meeting. Get a good sense of their team, the outcomes that they're expecting to pursue, as well as their capacity to do that. Now, why is this important? Well, I want to introduce you to my first dilemma and why purpose is so important. Here's a grade 6 team, a question that we pursued together in a coaching protocol. And what we were looking at is they really wanted to support more effective agents of learning. But what the school expected for them was to implement more structured and consistent math and language practices. So, you know, on the face of it, we can see an inherent conflict and something that can be quite demoralizing to a team that has their heart set on something, especially that's aligned with, in this case, the IB, which is where they really wanted to work and develop their own skills and capabilities. Now, when we're establishing purpose and we want to answer that question, we need to keep in mind the values and beliefs at heart here, because already on the surface, we see a conflict between them, what's expected from the school and what the team wants to pursue. So we need to have conversations around the values inherent in both. It can't just be something we throw on a team. We actually have to support it with the values and the beliefs, so that we can begin to have that conversation around the values and the beliefs that they have contributing to the purpose that they want to pursue. If we want to align what the team wants with what the school needs, we need to start that conversation and ground it in the values and beliefs that are inherent in what we want to achieve. Now, hopefully these values and beliefs are already explicit and documented well within your vision and mission, and they can be seen as being supported in the strategy of a school. Now, here is a graphic image from my book, Hidden in Plain Sight, Realizing the Full Potential of Middle Leaders, where I talk about the importance of alignment with the team to the school. And one of the most important ways to align them is through their goal setting. So when we're clarifying their purpose, what we want to do is not only discuss what needs to happen from that school level, school-wide, and how important it is for this team, in this case, the grade 6 team, to support that initiative, but also ensuring that they've set goals that are aligned with it. Now, there's 3 examples of goals that I think are very important for every team to have. There's the personal goals at the teacher level. These are goals in their own professional development direction that they want to pursue. Hopefully we can align that with what the team goal is, because then they can be self-supporting. Next, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the leadership goal supports the team. Now, the leadership goal can be based on that sort of those 3 dimensions I identified earlier, based on the middle leaders recognizing what obstacles might exist within the team to pursue an outcome. So through this process of alignment, we want to make sure personal and team goals align with the needs, not only of the school, but that of the team, and that the team leaders identifying goals to help the team overcome any obstacles that might present themselves. Now, as they move through this alignment process, what we want to consider is the expectation we have for them, is it going to be this short, mid, or long term? Is it something they can do in a year? Is it something that might take 2 or 3 years? Imagine having that conversation now before the start of next year. Imagine saying to a middle leader that, hey, this is the direction the school's moving in. These are some initiatives that we've identified to help our community. We expect that it's going to take 3 years. And we would hope that you're going to be with us during those 3 years to help us achieve it, so that you can plan how to move your team towards that initiative. Now, in terms of getting them aligned, imagine how empowering that would feel to say, look, we've selected you for this position. We know you're the right person for this position, and we have a long-term view on what we want this position to achieve. So therefore, when we look at the outcome window, what are the capabilities and capacities you have in relation to the outcome that we expect, and how can we as a school help you develop those capacities and capabilities so that you can achieve that outcome? Because then as a middle leader, preparing them now for that development to come next year and the year after just gives them like 6 months right now, just to begin thinking about all the ways that they can develop to help their team prepare that, really put in place sort of the team building initiatives that need to take place in the beginning, and move through the different types of projects and aspects of this planning that they can do. Now, that's what we're talking about in terms of alignment. To do that, we need to consider for this purpose who that team is, how they will do it, and why they're doing it. That moral purpose that Michael Fullen talks about, the why. What this looked like for this grade 6 team was, from this purpose statement, was really focusing on the how they were going to be working towards this, and how they were going to be able to get their students to play a part in terms of helping this structured and consistent math and language. How could they actually marry these two together, work as a team? And this purpose statement is a reminder of why they're doing this. Now, I've put in this slide a simple tool for you. It's my clarity of purpose survey. So for the teacher leaders out there that want to get a quick test of how well they've been leading their team purposefully this past year, take this. This is a self-assessment. It will produce a report for you that will have plenty of tools and strategies for you to help lead your team more purposefully in the future. Check it out. Now, moving quickly along, second dilemma that I want to address. The head of faculty of a maths team that I've been working with, and I've been working with he and of course the other middle leaders, he presented the dilemma to his colleagues. And the dilemma he presented was that he had students that he didn't think were going to pass the A-levels math exam. And he had never shared this with anybody. He did share this with a coordinator. The coordinator was unable to assist him other than directing some resources towards him. But here in the workshop, which was the only occasion the middle leaders had to have to come together, I facilitated a consultancy protocol. This was the dilemma that was presented. And as this faculty member was presenting his dilemma, I started noticing other participants shaking their heads. I saw a few of them writing things down and showing it to others. When I asked them what they were doing, they said they started writing down names and sharing them with other teachers to see if those teachers also agreed that those names might be the people that this math teacher was talking about. Sure enough, English and science also had the same concern about the exact same 5 students. Now, if it wasn't for the fact that they had a workshop together with a consultancy protocol for this math teacher to share that, they never would have understood that they had a common dilemma. Despite the fact that they're in different subjects, they have the same students. One of the most important things that we need to understand is that students are not the responsibility of one teacher, but the responsibility for all teachers. Now, I'm going to share with you some research from Maxim Stich from the University of Michigan. And I want to talk about the importance of a middle leadership team and just a couple of different ways that you can organize it. Personally, I think a middle leadership team can work in a pooled interdependence. Now, again, this is something I address in my book, but when we talk about pooled interdependence, it's really about these middle leaders coming together and talking about topics that they have in common, that they share. And ideally, for a senior leader, what we want them to be talking about are school-wide initiatives. The level of coordination demand for this is very low. So I think it's a great way to do it, to have middle leaders meet once a month. I highly encourage all schools to create that time for middle leaders to come together, to create their own agenda, but to ensure that agenda is aligned with what the school's initiatives are. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Maxim Stich's research on this in a little bit when I talk about the degree of coordination related to middle leaders and teams. But first, let's begin thinking about how a middle leadership team is formed. Does it need a leader? I don't think so. I think that facilitation and chairmanship can be, or chairpersonship can be shared across the members. Why does this team exist? I think at the heart of it, it's really just to support each other and share best practices and experiences in relation to school-wide initiatives. What does this team do? Really is there as a form of support. It's its own form of well-being, and it's incredibly important. And every time I have these middle leadership workshops, I always put in a lot of time so that middle leaders have time to consult each other. And it's probably what they take away the most from in terms of professional development, that sharing of experience. Now, how does this team do it? Well, that's largely going to be up to the school. Are they going to set aside time for it? And when they do, as a team, they're going to have to form like any other team. They're going to have to come up with norms and processes for how they're going to work together. Now, that's an important consideration for a middle leadership team. The third dilemma, and I'm going to come back to Maxim Stich's work now, because it's about time. Time is the greatest enemy within our schools, and next year is not going to be any different, and potentially it will be worse. But I want to draw your attention to some work that Google did. Project Aristotle was done quite a few years ago now, but if you go to rework or you search Project Aristotle, you're going to find that Google did its work on what an effective team is. Now, in doing their work, they identified what the attributes of an effective team are. Psychological safety was right at the top, but that's not why I'm here today to talk about. I'm here to talk about the difference between a supervisor and a middle leader, or a supervisor and a leader. A supervisor is generally what most schools have. In fact, almost every school I go into To call a teacher leader a leader is not doing them service at all. They're really supervisors. We just label them leaders. To call them a leader, we need to give them more time to lead. Now, what that looks like is the coordination demands. If we're going to talk about collaboration, we need to expect and respect the fact that they need more time to coordinate within their team to ensure true collaboration is happening. And that's what, at Maxim's level of reciprocal interdependence, is really all about. To be able to lead that level of interdependence takes more than just giving a teacher leader one free period. I would advocate at a minimum 2 free periods. If we really want our leaders to lead next year, we need to give them the time to do it, because the research shows to actually lead that level of interdependence towards outcomes that, you know, are critical to student success requires a lot of time. Let's start having the conversation now about where that time can be found. And when we do find that time, let's create a sandbox that shields that team from all the other distractions going on in the school, that really protects them to pursue the outcomes or the purpose that we've asked them to do, that's aligned with what the school needs. Within that sandbox, let's not only identify the members, but also who's looking in the sandbox, who's going to be interacting with that sandbox and what their role and responsibility is. And if we can identify that now, these teams moving forward are going to feel much more confident about the work that they have to do. And I guarantee you, they're going to work harder than they ever have before, because they're going to be working purposefully. And that is probably the greatest motivation in anybody's job, is knowing that you're working purposefully. So build that sandbox, help them to build that sandbox. Now, considerations about a sandbox, same thing, 3 dimensions. What stage is that team in? Are they capable of working interdependently right now, or do they need more time to do it? What is the culture of the team? Are they feeling burnt out and needing some breathing room before tackling any challenges next year? Let's acknowledge it. Let's surface it. Let's let them know that we understand it, we appreciate it, and let's try to find ways to help them move past it. The capacity of the team. What are you asking the team to do? By preparing your teacher leaders now, you're helping them understand how to find or build the capacity to do what they're going to need to do. And we might even in this conversation be able to take a few things off their plate. So really important to have those conversations now, especially if we want to have a true sandbox for them. Now, as I promised, 15 minutes, leaving time for questions and answers. What I want to do is, quickly show a summary of what we talked about today, clarifying purpose for our teacher leaders for next year. Probably the most important thing we can do is really helping them develop that purpose aligned with the school and taking into account what they need to do or what they've observed and see within their team and their students, what they need. Establish a middle leadership team. Helping middle leaders prepare now for next year includes getting them to already interact with other middle leaders. And lastly, build a sandbox. Now, before I open it up to questions, I just want to let you know, I'll be sharing these slides with everybody who registered. Also, there are more free micro lessons to come. Go to this link. We have Jennifer Abrams, we have Stephen Barkley, we have James Anderson, we have Stuart McAlpine, great educational leaders, all giving you free lessons to help you prepare for next year. This is all part of Acamus's workshop promotion as well. I'm going to be delivering Leading Effective Teams April 17th, where we still have a few seats left. I hope that you'll check it out if you want to get access to more of these tools and really broaden the conversation around what I discussed, as well as the other academic leaders, educational influencers that are going to be speaking for us. If you have any questions, I would love to take them. Yes, Alexander, what question do you got for me today?
I was wondering, what are the 2 or 3 most important things you would think a team should have in place when there is reasonable turnover in the team? So 2 or 3 teachers are leaving, new teachers are arriving, but we have to have that team still functioning next year and the year after. So what are the solid things? What are the base that this team should have in order to keep working properly despite the turnover?
Great question. So when I think about the 3 things a team should be planning for now, if there's going to be a high degree of turnover, one, get the current team to acknowledge the fact that, hey, there are team members leaving. I'm a huge fan of Doug Oda and Safe Passage. He talks about how important it is to have leaving rituals, not just for students, but for teachers. Part of that leaving ritual can actually be addressing, hey, you're going, we want to celebrate the work that you've done this year, but we also want to prepare teachers that are going to be coming new to the team next year. So how can we create that bridge now? Is there a way to begin communicating with the teachers for next year? Is there a way that we can document the work that we're on and our working practices? When we start to look at the teachers that are going to be joining next year, well, effective induction means that those teachers are going to be already in contact with us. And based on the fact that we have an opportunity to engage with them earlier, we can begin sharing with them some of the challenges that we as a team are facing so that they can come in prepared. More importantly, and my third recommendation, when the new year starts, recognize that it's a new team. Even though the work of the team might be continuing, give that team an opportunity to continue to develop as a new team. Give them the time and the space to go through those rituals for developing their own norms and really having an opportunity to shape that purpose. So thanks for that question.
Sounds perfect. Thank you.
Quick one here. I see came in on the chat. Given the timeline that we have between now and the end of the year, what do you suggest for the number of meetings to get next year's leaders thinking? How many is too many? All right, great question. So we have about 3 months when you think about it, April, May, and June. I would think that, if we had like potentially a town hall, an opportunity for middle leaders to come together and just acknowledge the fact that they are going to be the leaders next year and begin to maybe facilitate a discussion around some of the challenges that they're beginning to see, survey them, have them an opportunity to interact with each other would be a great first one. Now, ideally, whoever they're directly reporting to, I think that there needs to be some more level of meaningful interaction one-on-one between the middle leader and who that supervisor is. So potentially, we're looking at an additional meeting, maybe one as a whole group, but then whoever the deputy principal or the principal, whoever is responsible for that middle leader, I think it'd be important that they also have one a month. And you can break it up in terms of, hey, what's working for the team now? What can be improved in terms of, what we're expecting in terms of challenges for next year? And lastly, what should be the focus when we get started next year? Those 3 questions could technically be 3 different meetings. And I think it's important that when we address them, that's an opportunity to also begin crafting that purpose statement and encouraging that middle leader to engage with their team to also, surface the common concerns that they might have around those questions. So great question. Appreciate that, Alan. So, sorry guys. Yeah, I'm going off 2 machines here and using a microphone on one of them. But hey, that said, if anybody else has a question, raise a hand or throw something in the chat, and I'd happily will address it. All right, guys. Well, hey, I really appreciate you participating today and also the questions. I look forward to getting this recording to you as well as the slides. And please feel free to interact with me in any way that you want with more questions. I'm always happy to help. Also happy to see some familiar faces here as well. So have a good one, guys, and good luck for the rest of the school year. I look forward to continuing to engage with you. Bye-bye.